You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. Well, the trade deadline's over, and now we're just waiting to see whether or not the White Sox will have the worst record in the history of Major League Baseball, and I think we're all really excited to see what they were going to do. And I have mixed feelings about it. I didn't want to trade Luis Robert Jr. I didn't want to trade Garrett Crochet. I don't see why it has to be a 5-year rebuild. So on one hand, I'm happy they're still on the team. On the other hand, it didn't seem very easy for anybody in Major League Baseball, at least at this trade deadline, to pick up high-quality bats that were ready to play in the majors. A few, but not a lot. And that's what the White Sox need. I'm not giving up hope on turning this thing around quickly, but it does sound like they're really trying to trade Garrett Crochet. And I'm starting to get the feeling they would have traded Luis Robert Jr. if he wasn't performing subpar. You don't need to move these guys, but it seems like they're trying to move their best pieces and restart everything. That said, at least he didn't get rid of Crochet because he was mad at him. Like, I believed after listening to Chris Getz talk, before the trade deadline was over, he's out there in front of microphones and he's expressing how angry he is with Crochet and his agents and the fact they basically cratered his value with the whole idea that he wouldn't pitch in the postseason without an extension. And I really thought Getz was going to take the best offer possible when you got to that final hour of the trade deadline because he didn't want the guy on his team anymore. At least that's how it felt to me. So when I see what the Dodgers gave up for Jack Flaherty, and I read Bob Nightingale essentially saying it was Sox and Dodgers talking right up till the end, and Getz essentially just wouldn't take what the Dodgers were offering. He held his pitcher. That gave me hope. I didn't like the return for Fedde and Pham and Kopech all packaged together, but at least we weren't giving away our big-time chip, even if he angered us. And for some reason, that felt like a little bit of a change in the organization. Still underwhelmed. Not how I wanted this trade deadline to go. I don't think a lot of people wanted it to go this way. You wanted more. But the offseason will come. I think now, even though I don't want it to happen, Garrett Crochet will get traded in that offseason, even though I would love the extension, even though I would love them to turn it around in time, that it makes sense to keep Luis Robert Jr. around. These are the kind of things we're going to be talking about at Cork and Carry at the Park on August the 9th in front of a live crowd. Sox in the Basement, the 108 combining, and I'll also announce it. Sounds like Rock 95.5 is coming out there to join us as well. Maybe we'll get a free chainsaw out of the deal. Everybody wants to be a part of the first game Sox Cubs pregame party live podcast that nobody's ever going to hear, I don't think, unless they're there, with Sox in the Basement and the 108. I love it. Award-winning burgers, ballpark favorites on that menu, great price, bring the whole family, pregame, postgame, any game, with the indoor-outdoor seating, that incredible staff to make sure you get what you want, you get it quick, you make it over to the game. But on Friday, August the 9th, get over to 33rd and Princeton in the shadow of the ballpark. We kick off at 5, and it is going to be an absolute blast. Be there for this free event kicking off Sox Cubs weekend, and see more at corkandcarry.com. Because I need somebody who understands the prospects that were picked up, what goes on inside of that front office, just a little bit of insight, and maybe just can get a grasp on what the plan is. I'm bringing in James Fox of FutureSox. He's our go-to guy at moments like this, trade deadline, draft. We talked to him at the beginning of the month. We'll wrap up July with James Fox. How are you, buddy?
I am good, sir. I'm glad that's over. Like, my goodness. Like, that's just...
I can feel like your frustration watching you tweet. Like, I could see that you want to say more and you only get so many characters. And so that's why I want to bring you on, because look, people are frustrated. Like, I did not like the three-way trade with the Cardinals and the Dodgers. And heck, nationally, I saw CBS Sports give it an A for the other two teams and a D for the White Sox. I see former GMs going, what is Chris Getz doing? I don't know if the players he got back are good or bad as much as I seem to feel like, at least internally, looking at what they gave up, which is 3 players, to only get 3 back, and to see some of the return for other starting pitchers around Major League Baseball, it just feels like there's a piece or two missing. Like Getz forgot to ask St. Louis for a prospect.
Yeah, no, it was very strange. Like I said yesterday, like I like the 3 players that they acquired, but it's just like missing a piece. Like I don't know. I don't really get it. And like, look, I don't like questioning front offices, like, you know, cause like, I don't know, like I just assume that they're taking the best deal, right? Like, I don't think they're like, well, these other 2 deals are better, but we really want to take this one instead, because like, that doesn't make any sense to me. But I just kind of thought Fedde had more value than that. Now, if the package that they took was for Fedde, like I would have been really happy with that return. I just like don't understand how Michael Kopech gets thrown into the mix, like for the Dodgers. Like I don't know. I also like don't really like the trade for the Dodgers that much, because I just like don't think Tommy Edman's any good. And you have Michael Kopech. Like, okay, what are we gonna see, Chris? Like what's more likely? Like in a playoff game, a big moment for Eloy Jimenez with the Orioles, or a big moment for Michael Kopech with the Dodgers?
I don't know. Eloy Jimenez may not be healthy in time for the postseason. I think I'd reach for the pitcher, but I'd also say the big moment might be Kopech giving up 2 home runs, and it could very easily be Kopech in the 6th inning striking out the side. Like, he's a wild card.
He's a total wild card. I bet he'll be good there. But no, I mean, you're right. Like, on the trade, like the trade has been like, they've been getting destroyed for this trade. You know, it's pretty funny. The only guy that liked the trade for the White Sox, I feel like, is Keith Law, who like typically doesn't really like much of what the White Sox do, but he was a huge Miguel Vargas guy. So
that's the guy.
Yeah. Like, so he was a top 40 prospect in baseball for years. He posted 400 on base percentages with the Dodgers. He played all over, mostly because he's not great on defense. But I mean, the White Sox envision this guy as a middle of the order bat. Like, he's got an OPS over 1,000 for AAA Oklahoma City. So look, I think this is the answer, right? Like, why did that trade look so weird? Well, the White Sox think Miguel Vargas is really good and he has 6 years of control. So if they're wrong, it's going to look really bad, right? But if he's a contributor and he's, you know, part of your lineup for the next like 5 years or so, the trade will be fine, because I think the second piece is really exciting. Gerald Perez, he was in the Futures game this year. He's a young, like 19-year-old prospect. He's one of the best 19-year-olds in A-ball right now. I mean, he really controls the strike zone. He's got power. He can probably play third or second. That's like the type of interesting flyer you want to take. And then the third guy, of course, is injured. Like, they had to trade for an injured guy.
It's so White Sox. It's, you know what? Here's the thing. I'm going to play devil's advocate here, because I was doing it online when the trade was made, okay? Miguel Vargas sounds like, as a guy who gets on base, this is similar to something that Ed and I have talked about on the show. Look, they've got to find professional hitters. It's hard to find professional hitters. They got to find somebody that maybe was blocked or it didn't work out, that's ready to slide right in and has a good pedigree. And you could say that's the type of guy. On the other hand, I watched the Dodgers last year give him the first half of the season at second base, and he got a long extended look, and he looked bad. Now, he looked good in AAA again, but he looked really bad when he got a long extended look last year. And then I read a lot of tweets from Dodgers fans who were like, time to get him out of here. He can't play defense. So then he also got moved into the corner. Remember, he was a third base prospect who they tried out at second and then ended up as a corner outfield platoon. So essentially, I'm trying to figure out, did he get enough of a chance? Because it's possible. I mean, like, the White Sox have never given some of their other prospects a chance. Like, Lenny Sosa's got the same amount of at-bats right now as Vargas, but his was up and down and up and down and up and down. If he would have been given 81 straight games, does he play better? Does he need more time? Like, that's the thing I'm trying to figure out. Like, can a guy like Vargas with that much last year and a team like the Dodgers saying, well, He's not the answer. We'd rather trade for somebody after we get injuries in our infield. Is that guy really a potential middle-of-the-order guy? Did the Dodgers give up on him too soon because they're going into the postseason and they don't have time? Or are the White Sox just a little bit too hopeful on a guy who missed when he got an opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, it might be a combination of both. I mean, the White Sox are probably too optimistic, right? But if you're the Dodgers, you have so many prospects. Like, he kind of reminds me of the right-handed version of, like, Michael Busch, kind of. And Michael Busch has been really good for the Cubs. Like, Michael Busch is a 130 WRC plus guy for the Cubs. And obviously he's a first baseman, so it's like limited. But I just think when you're the Dodgers and you're trying to win, like you have so many prospects that like you can acquire good stuff for your leftover prospects. And if you're the White Sox, like, they clearly think this guy's pretty good. He's DHing tonight. I'm just curious to see what they do with him. Like, I would play Vargas at third base the rest of the year.
I find that interesting as James Fox sits with us here on Sox in the Basement, brought to you in part by Hyatt Home Medical Equipment. Switch to a new age of life. Keep mom and dad, grandma and grandpa out of assisted living. Make it so they can get around on their own and live independently. Stair lifts, ramps, grab bars, lift chairs, even bathroom remodeling, all at Hyatt Home Medical Equipment. They work with your insurance and have 0% financing for qualified individuals. If you use a CPAP machine, or let's say somebody you live with does, and they sound like Darth Vader all the time, get them to Hyatt Home Medical Equipment. Switch over, get supplies directly mailed to you, and trust me, those things should not be that loud. There's been advancements in technology. Get a new one. Hyatt also has the latest and greatest in continuous glucose monitors. Learn all about Hyatt Home Medical Equipment at hhme.com. Okay, so you want Miguel Vargas starting at third base. That's interesting. I know that's what he was, but I also wonder, do you want to first see the bat? Like, do you want to take the pressure off of playing an infield position, much like how you see some teams with prospects like MJ Melendez when he came up, and Francisco Alvarez as a catcher, and a couple other people, like they've been taking their catchers and sticking them in the outfield because it's like, well, give him a low pressure thing like corner outfield, let the bat get going, and then move him in. I mean, Ramirez for the Guardians started in the outfield, got the bat going, they moved him over, and he's an all-star third baseman. So, like, I've been wrestling with the same thing. Like, do you just let him get the bat going? If you really believe he's a middle-of-an-order guy, he hasn't shown that yet with consistent at-bats. Do you want to get that going first before you plug him in at third or second?
Maybe, and maybe that's what they're going to do. Maybe they're just going to play him at DH. I'd like to kind of rotate the DH if we can, but look, I mean, Miguel Vargas is going to get some runway to play for the White Sox here, and we're going to see. I mean, the one thing that's, it doesn't really matter, right? But, the White Sox didn't add a ton to their actual farm system, like at this deadline. I mean, the 3 teenagers that they added, and look, I've been wanting them to add teenagers like this for years. Like, I don't know why Marco Patti isn't signing these guys, like out of the Dominican Republic and Venezuela. Like, you have to trade for them after the fact. But I mean, both of the kids from the Dodgers and the kid they got from the Phillies for Tanner Banks, they all control the strike zone. They all walk, like high walk rates. I just tweeted about something like that earlier. So they definitely have a type, like under Chris Getz, right? Like, so they're going to have to like find power from somewhere, but I do kind of like the profiles of these guys. I think the Tanner Banks trade was like really good. Like William Bergola out of Venezuela, like he hasn't hit, but he signed for like $2.5 million for the Phillies in 2022. He was one of the top prospects in that international class. Now he might end up being a glove only, like really fast middle infielder, and it doesn't turn into much, but I mean, it was Tanner Banks. So, that type of deal, I think is fine. I think you get a carbon-based life form for Eloy Jimenez, and they got to,
that's a genius move. Like, that's a genius move. Like, you don't have to do the buyout and you move on from him and you get him off your team and he's kind of blocking everything, and you might not like his attitude, and he might be one of those guys that Getz refers to as, I need to get some of these guys out of here because they just don't fit the way I want them to play. Like, that felt like that was a genius move to be able to get anybody to take him and not be like, and we're paying his whole contract, and we're taking care of his buyout, and we got a bag of balls. Like, I thought that was a good deal.
Well, it's pretty funny. Like, the Knights are playing the Norfolk Tides, which is the the Orioles AAA team, and the guy they got is like a 26-year-old lefty reliever in AAA, right? Who we'll probably see like in a week with the White Sox, right? And it was like, decent numbers, whatever. Like, it's fine, But like, okay, they got something that might help you for Eloy Jimenez, like in 2024. Like, I don't know. I think the Orioles are like really good at what they do, but I don't really get that one for them.
Let's look at this big picture at the deadline, because I want to compare it to things that you said at the beginning of the month. Elijah Evans, your colleague over there at FutureSox, who's also with Just Baseball, was on recently. He said it when we were talking about the draft. I'm seeing a theme, and I feel like I saw it with what they acquired. On one hand, I'm upset that there weren't more major league ready guys that came over, right? Like, I hate the idea that we've got a couple of A-ball guys because that takes forever, and I really don't want this to be a 4-year rebuild. But when I look at the players acquired, there seems to be a theme. We saw in the draft they wanted a lot of relief pitchers. When they trade away Jimenez, they just get another person they can throw in there because they're not going to spend a lot of money on their bullpen. We see young players that are being acquired that, as you said, control the strike zone and have a process, because they're really bad as an organization of developing hitters from scratch. So they wanted guys that already had a process and kind of already knew what they want to do at the plate, that they may be tweaking instead of completely developing. And then they did get a major league ready guy who, again, is that kind of profile, just further along. Are you convinced at this point that the Sox have the goal of, tons of really good arms in the Bannister lab? We're not spending a lot on bullpens, so we're going to draft and we're going to acquire bullpen arms that are good because we're just going to run through them and cycle through them because relievers are a dime a dozen. And let's find guys with a process at the plate who work the zone. And that's our focus as a team moving forward.
Well, I think so. And I think they know that they're bad at teaching hitting. And until like that changes, like, I think, you have to get guys with a baseline. And so, like, one of the big issues, and we kind of talked about this often, teams are not trading prospects anymore. Like, if you look at this deadline, and I know like the list at MLB Pipeline that everybody looks at, like, that list hasn't been updated in months. Like, the scouting reports are great. Those guys do great work, but like the list isn't updated. The Baseball America list, which is fresh, 0 top 100 prospects traded at this deadline. So, like, if you're a team like the White Sox who needs impact offensive talent, you have to go find a Miguel Vargas, like a post-hype prospect, right? Like a guy that was a top 50 prospect in baseball that got an opportunity and failed and now isn't. And you take the gamble on that guy hoping he is, or you trade for 19-year-olds in A-ball who might be on a prospect list next year. I mean, even like some of the other returns, like we talked about, Connor Norby and Josh Stowers, from the Orioles. They're excess Orioles prospects. They go to the Marlins. Like, it's a solid deal for the Marlins. But I mean, like, Connor Norby, like, some publications have him as a 35 defender at second base, which is bad, by the way. Like, he's going to hit. He's already like 24 or 25. So he's going to be like a middle infielder that hits, but like is bad defensively. Stowers, it's a ton of strikeouts. Like, even like one of the other trades the Marlins made, Davion De Los Santos, they got, right? He's 21. He's got huge power, right? But he's like a 45% chase rate, and he plays in the Pacific Coast League, which is like super inflated. So like all these guys traded all have flaws. The teams they're not trading their top guys, which is why Garrett Crochet and Luis Robert are still on the White Sox right now.
Yeah, that's the thing that I actually was happy with when it came to Chris Getz. Like, I felt like he got himself tunnel vision, first of all. Like, I feel like early on in that deal, he's trying to move Fedde. He's talking with the Cardinals. The Cardinals are probably sitting along going, okay, we don't want to give you what you're asking for. And he knows the Dodgers want Edman. Now all of a sudden, like, he's like, well, would you give me Edman? Now he goes to the Dodgers. It's 10 days. He describes it. He's in a 10-day thing to put together a 3-team trade. I think he got a little bit of tunnel vision. And I also wonder if he's also talking with the Dodgers, going through the drama with Crochet. The Dodgers are probably the only team that's still sitting around going, yeah, we might sign him to an extension. That doesn't really bother us. And he's trying to ingratiate himself a little bit with the Dodgers by trying to get that first deal done because he's talking about his bigger piece with them later on. It just doesn't work out because they don't come through with it. So I kind of feel like there was a stumble with the 3-team trade, but the fact that he didn't bite at the best offer for Crochet, no matter how angry he seems with him about the events of the last week, that was a good thing because I was afraid he was going to be like, well, I want this guy off my team. What's the best offer? I'm trading to whatever team has the best offer before it hits 5 p.m. here Central Time.
No, I agree with you. And whatever it is that they turn down today that they could get, I guarantee you they can get in December. Like they can probably get more. Like if Garrett Crochet goes 3-4 innings the rest of the year and he's this guy, he's one of the best pitchers in the American League, like it's still 2 years with 2 playoff runs. Like they'll get a ton. They'll get more than they got for Dylan Cease. Now, would you and I prefer that they just like open up the wallet and pay Garrett Crochet? Like,
yes,
yeah, probably. But
yes.
that doesn't seem likely, right? So then your next best outcome is maximizing him. But that doesn't mean that it had to be right now with 2 suitors with the whole baseball world scared that he's gonna like not pitch for them. So that whole thing was weird. Like I understand him, like where he's coming from, but I mean, some teams are really put off by that kind of stuff. Like, oh, you don't want to pitch in the playoffs? Like, that sort of thing. Like, so I don't mind Garrett Crochet and Luis Robert being here. I think the White Sox can still get really good returns for those type of guys. But I'll tell you, like Chris Getz can't be super thrilled with this deadline because I feel like they wanted to move more pieces and get more stuff. Which is why that first trade is it's a little bit perplexing because you're right. That should be 4 or 5 players for those guys. I kind of thought that Michael Kopech had more value than that, especially after seeing like some of the returns for relievers like across baseball today and yesterday.
So the Crochet thing. And this is really interesting to me. And you're the first person that brought it up. And I know you got brought up on the MLB Network. I think they showed your tweet about it.
Yeah, they showed my tweet. Yeah,
I thought that was awesome. So they're like James Fox pointed us out. It's an interesting thing to talk about. So let's talk about it for a minute here. If I'm the White Sox, if I'm the general manager of the White Sox, and I want to extend Crochet, and we've always kind of floated out there, what if Brian Bannister looks at this and says, we've got better things coming, maximize him, and maybe we don't want to extend him, or maybe what he's asking for is so far off it's laughable. But the first thing I would do is figure out, do you want to go back and say, bygones be bygones, let's really work at it over the next month or so and get you extended? And if you can't get to that, I know the Players Association would file agreements. I know people would have, players in the league would have a bad opinion of the White Sox, but they already do, right? And I sit there and I think to myself, you could justify this. You could say, we tried to start him the last couple of games and he's only able to go 3 or 4 innings. He's verbally told everybody that he can't pitch into the postseason. He's afraid to. We don't think we can pitch him every 5 days, and we need all 26 spots on the roster to try out all these other guys because we're trying to get better for next year. So if he can't go every 5 days and at least give us 5 or 6 innings, we would like to send him down to AAA or AA where he can work with our guys, and we'll start him every 7 or 8 days and just give him a break on that arm because we don't want to shut him down. And then you get another year of control. And they may be mad about it, but I think you could justify it. Like if I'm a heartless general manager, I don't care about your family and your relationships. I just want you to win, baby. I'd be considering it if I were mad at him. Do you think Chris Getz would consider it?
I don't think so now because I think the Players Association, it would be a huge problem. But my point was that like everybody like is always like, oh, screw the White Sox. Like, Garrett Crochet is doing the right thing. He doesn't owe them anything. Like they've bent over backwards for Garrett Crochet. Like he wasn't sent down when he was hurt at all, any of that. Like he was on the big league roster, like sucking up service time. Like at the beginning of the year this year when they said that they were going to turn him into a starter, they very easily could have sent him to Charlotte and been like, yeah, you're starting, but you're starting down here. And they didn't do that. They let him do it in the majors. And then his agency basically cratered his trade value. I would have been really mad too if I were Chris Getz. And the other thing that's crazy about that, right? Why do people think that somebody was going to try to run Garrett Crochet into the ground? That doesn't make any sense to me. If you're going to trade for this guy, you're not going to run him into the ground to like win a World Series when you still have him for 2 more seasons after this one. Like, I don't really understand what the implication is. Like, oh, we're going to make him a high leverage reliever this year and then start him in the play. Like, nobody's going to do that. That doesn't make any sense. Everybody would have just had him be the opener or something like every 5 days with the intention of having innings left so he could throw in the playoffs. So, yeah, I don't know. The whole thing is strange. I think we're going to be talking about Garrett Crochet all winter, probably.
All right, so who are you playing right now? I know you've got it in your head. You're looking at this now. Trade deadline's done. Some of these guys aren't part of the long term. There's guys that are playing really well down in the minors, and there's guys that have joined this team right now. Can you, I mean, I don't know. I can think off the top of my head how I'd want to do things with the rotation, who's my starting 5 going forward, and whether or not I'm piggybacking now on Crochet with another one of the young arms that's down in the minors. And also, I kind of can figure out my configuration out in the field because there's certain guys I want to see, and there's other guys that don't really matter. What do you think they should be doing going forward?
Well, I don't think you need to see Nick Senzel or Nicky Lopez anymore. Like, there's just no reason for it. Like, I'd play Vargas at third as much as possible or DH him, whatever. Like, I'd play Brooks Baldwin at shortstop because there's no reason not to, and you play Lenny Sosa at second pretty much every day. Vaughn's on the team, so he'll play. Sheets will play. You know, you have Corey Lee catching as much as you possibly can. I don't really know that there's anybody else that needs to come up necessarily. Like,
does Dominic Fletcher get more time in the outfield?
Yeah, so I would play him every day. Like, and maybe you don't want him facing lefties, but yeah, I mean, he's my right fielder against right-handed pitching every day because you have to find out like what you have in some of these guys. And then as far as the pitching staff goes, like, I'm really interested to see what they do because Brian Bannister is a big fan of like having young pitchers come up and start their careers in the bullpen. And you have any number of dudes like Ty Bush and, you know, Jake Eater, Jairo Iriarte, like any of those guys could be here at any time, pitching in any sort of role for this White Sox team just to kind of see. You know, like, there's no more waiver trades, Chris, but like, I wonder if any White Sox players get claimed like on waivers, right? Like, would a contender grab Chris Flexen for free, you know, just because like you need him to start a game because like you don't want to start one of your guys that matters, you know, or like, would somebody grab Nicky Lopez off waivers? Like, I don't really know. Like, one of the guys I was really surprised didn't get moved was John Brebbia, but then I forgot that his contract's like not great. And look, we saw Brebbia give up a slam the other night, and he hasn't been great, but like his peripheral numbers, he has like a 342 FIP on the year, and he strikes out 11.6 guys per 9. That's just like the type of like data guy that teams want, but he's still owed money, and he has like a buyout for next year. So I think that's probably the reason why he didn't move, unlike a guy like cheap like Tanner Banks. But yeah, no, like we're thinking of the same guys. There's no reason for some of these guys to be playing.
I don't understand Tukey, and I don't understand Chad Kuhl in the bullpen right now. I thought that was weird. I was waiting for one of those young guys because I've read the same thing that you just talked about, that Bannister likes to bring guys up, and it seems like there's a lot of guys that are probably ready to at least get a look in the bullpen.
Yeah, I think they'll do it. I just think they'll be more strategic about it. Like, it's really easy to DFA Tukey Toussaint like whenever you need to, or Chad Kuhl. Or what, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, okay, we think Mason Adams is ready to come start. Like, just dump this other guy. So I think, you know, a lot of it is going to be, it'll be that, like, for the rest of the year. And hopefully, you know, some things you want to see, like, I mean, you want to see if Miguel Vargas is anything. And I think you really want a hot finish for Luis Robert. You really want him going into the winter strong if we can. I think that would be the best thing for all parties. I think this thing's going to take a while. I'm not sure Luis Robert's on your next good team. He's represented by Boris. I think that ship has kind of sailed. It's just he hasn't been very good, so trading him at this deadline didn't really make much sense.
All right, so that leads me to my final question for James Fox of FutureSox, because I want his opinion on this, okay? I've seen some video of Luis Robert Jr. in the last couple of weeks. The guy looks deflated. We get the report that the score put out during the trade deadline, during the last day of the trade deadline, where supposedly Pedro told all these guys, and Pedro's denied it, but told all these guys, if we're the worst team in baseball, it's all on the players. That's the way they're reporting it. They say they have sources and multiple sources that are backing that up, right? And then we have Chris Getz asked after that report came out by Vinny Duber if Pedro's job was safe for the remainder of the year. I'm going to read you the quote from Chris Getz. We just wrapped up the deadline, just wanted to focus on that. We'll get through tonight and kind of debrief and look through the players we acquired and move forward from there. That's not a ringing endorsement in any way. I think he should start packing his bags. Do you think they need to get him out of there, and possibly will, so that you can have a guy like Robert who feels crushed by this season, at least get a new person delivering the message to him?
I think they should. I think they should have a while ago, because he's not coming back next year. I just don't know that they will. I just don't know that it's up to Chris Getz. And that's the thing. Like, so who's the guy on ESPN, Eduardo Perez?
Yeah.
So him and Pedro are super tight. They like played at Florida State together. And I guess Eduardo Perez was on ESPN earlier, and he was talking about like this lack of communication with the White Sox. Shocker, right? So he's getting that from Pedro. I think the problem is the front office knows, right? Like, Pedro's done. But, like, they can't fire him unless Jerry lets them. And Jerry doesn't want to. So then that's where your, like, lack of communication comes in, right? Because it's like, yeah, Chris Getz is in charge, but, like, not really. Like, he's making deadline trades, but he can't fire the manager if he wants to. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, Ken Rosenthal put it in his column today that it could happen. So, I mean, maybe, they keep losing. We just, like, wake up and Grady Sizemore's the manager or something. Like, I mean, I think if you're going to have all these kids up here, I would have somebody else, like, leading. And then you can also start your manager search.
I love it. James Fox of FutureSox, an extended stay here on Sox in the Basement, coming out of the trade deadline. It wasn't what we wanted, but it's what we got. And we can at least see the direction, but this is still the most dysfunctional team in sports.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.